Hello everyone, YoHoJo here, and it's time to sit your asses down, open up your browser, head over to this URL, open up your Simba, grab your favorite snack, pop open a cold one, and open up your brain tubes, because it's time for some learning. Today, we will be going over Cohen's The Beginner's Tutorial. This video will be the first video in this new series I'm doing, in which I will be reading and going over tutorials made by other SRL members. And I will be starting with beginner tutorials, and I'll eventually move into intermediate and then advanced tutorials. And what better tutorial to start with than Cohen's The Beginner's Tutorial? This goes over all the basics and is made for people with absolutely no prior experience or knowledge of any programming or Simba or any of that. So this is great for all beginners, or even some intermediates might learn a few things from this tutorial, but it's mostly for the beginners. So what I'll just be doing now is reading this tutorial out loud with you, and it would help to have, like I do, have the tutorial open on one side of your screen, Simba open on the other, so you could read along with me. And also, there's a bit of actual programming to be done, so it'd be good to have your Simba open so you could type along with me. So here I begin. Introduction. Hello and welcome to the first of 3 of my all-in-one scripting tutorials. This is a rewrite of the beginner section of my all-in-one scar scripting tutorial. Throughout this tutorial you will learn many different scripting techniques, commands, and habits I've picked up during my time here at SRL. As well as learning how to script in Simba, you will be learning programming basics, which will help you learn other, more complicated programming languages such as Java, Python, or C and C++. Simba allows programming in the Pascal programming language, so naturally that is the language I'll be teaching you. I will be taking you through the different concepts step by step, starting with the basics. Keep in mind that no prior programming knowledge is required for you to understand this guide, but of course it would be helpful. Before continuing through this guide, you'll need to make sure you have installed Simba and SRL properly. If you don't know how to do this, you can follow the tutorial how to do so, and you would just need to click this link if you have not installed and set up Simba yet. This is very important. I highly suggest that you read this tutorial and you do the examples as they are taught to you. This way you will have a much better understanding of the concepts. I would also like you to please post any spelling, grammar, formatting mistakes I will probably make somewhere through the guide. If you want, this tutorial can be downloaded as a PDF here. He next continues with a table of contents which you can look through right here, and I'll be going over this from beginning to end. Starting here with Simba, the basics. Knowing Simba. When you open Simba, you will notice the blank script looks like this. So by default, when you open Simba, you will see these 3 lines here: Program New, Begin, and End. The Program New part is where what your script will be called. The program can be changed to whatever fits your interest. For example, you can change it to Bob's Amazing Woodcutter or Joe's Miner. Notice the underscore used instead of a space. This is because in any programming language there cannot be spaces in names. This includes names of procedures and functions. More on that later. So based on the script you are writing or what the script does, you can change the name of this program to anything you want, but just remember, instead of spaces you must use underscores. So for example, we can call this Beginner Tutorial Script. But like I said, or as the tutorial says, we won't actually be writing a script as much as just some coding examples and things like that, but this is just an example of how you can change the program name from new to whatever you wish. So you can title it this if you wish. The begin and end is called your main loop. Simba will read the code in your main loop as your script and run it as you please. If you would like Simba to run a function or procedure, you have to include it in your main loop. More on scripting structure later. So basically all that says is, when you actually run a script, it will only pay attention, or it will only execute whatever you have in between this begin and end at the very end. and we'll continue more on that later in the tutorial. Over on the left, you have your function list. You'll notice there are several categories to choose from. These are all the built-in functions, the built-in Simba functions that you can use at any time you wish. So what he's referring to is right here, the function list. They're organized by what they relate to. For example, let's find an easy one, mouse. If I click the plus sign, I can see these different mouse functions here, move mouse, scroll mouse, etc. And this is just letting me know these are all the possible functions I can use right now. And we'll definitely get more into that later. Next you have, at the bottom of the window, you'll see a white box with some writing in it. This is called the debug box. Any errors you have with yours or someone else's script will come up in this box. This is the debug box down here. Besides just errors and things, it just displays general information you need to know. If you have any extensions or settings enabled, it'll let you know that. Updaters. It automatically posts the latest Simba news, so you could always stay up to date. And if any updates happen, it will debug what's going on in the update process. As you can see here, SRL updated. So this is just letting me know that it's automatically updating, downloading, and extracting for me. And as you can see below, there's an image to better explain. One thing he didn't talk about is, one thing I missed to talk about was just below the function list you have the library search bar. In my opinion, this is one of the most useful Simba features, as it allows you to search for any function procedure that you wish. Type in color without quotes, and watch as it narrows the list down to only the functions or procedures that contain the word color. So later, once you learn a lot of the functions and procedures in your head, but maybe you forgot the parameters or exactly how to use them, but what they're called, you can just click down here, and as his example says, type in color, and this narrows down or filters the list to only the functions and procedures which contain the word color, from which you can see and click on and get a refresher on how exactly they work. Next, we'll be teaching you the basic types, and what he basically did was take this table from the SCAR manual, which he has a link to right here, and it shows the 4 of the I'll call them basic types. They might be the only types, but we'll think about that later. And some of the types he lists are strings, which are either text, a string of characters. Strings are always placed in between single quote marks like this. So example of a string could be A, and as you can see in Simba, by default it turns strings into a dark blue color. Or instead of just a letter, you can just have some text. As you can see here, instead of a underscore, you can have a space since it's a string. It's not something that the script is reading or interpreting. It's an actual set of words that you want the script to know or say. And strings do not have to just be letters. You can have numbers inside strings, any of the symbols, anything like that. Just anything in between these marks is considered a string. Next you have integers, which you would have learned in grade school, whole numbers, positive or negative. So any counting number basically is another way to say it, is considered an integer. Then you have extended, which are real numbers, positive and negative. All that means is that instead of just whole numbers, it includes decimals. And booleans, which have only two values. A boolean can either be true or false. And we'll get more into these four basic types, as well as other types further down in the tutorial. Next here we have procedures and functions. He says here procedures and functions are similar, yet different. Functions return a specific type, such as a boolean or integer, whereas a procedure doesn't return a type, it just does what it's told. So here he gives a little example. To start off, I'm going to explain to you the structure of functions and procedures using the following example. Function, int to string, I, long int, string. And before you get overwhelmed or anything by this, don't worry, he breaks it down right here and explains it to you. And I'll do the same thing. The function part is where it determines whether a function or procedure is going to be used. If a procedure were going to be used, it would take the place of a function. So basically, you're going to tell Simba, are you telling it a function? Which is, as he said, a function is something that returns a type, or a procedure, just code that needs to be executed. So basically, you just say function or procedure. Following function is the name of the procedure or function. In this case, the name is int to string, which stands for integer to string, and simply converts an integer to a string. The name can be anything you want as long as it contains no spaces. So, for example, let's say you wanted to create, let me think of two examples. Let's say you just wanted to chop a tree. That doesn't require you to return any values or anything like that. You simply just want to chop the tree. So you could, for example, say procedure chop tree and a semicolon. But let's say you wanted to know how many ores, or if we're using chop tree, how many logs were in your inventory. You could do something like function count logs, and if you think up here, what type would the number of logs in your inventory be? It would be an integer, a whole number. So you do count logs colon integer, just like that. So if you were to start writing a function that counted how many logs were in your inventory, you'd start setting it up like that. And that was a RuneScape related example. Inside the parentheses, we have the parameter of the procedure or function. In this example, there's one parameter, I. As you can see, it's declared as a long integer, which is the same thing as an integer. We'll dive more into parameters later. As we go on, you'll see actual code that requires you to enter in parameters and things like that, so you'll have a better understanding of what parameters actually are. Following the closed brackets is the result of the function. In this case, the result is a string. However, the result can be whatever fits your needs, i.e. string, integer, boolean, etc. Remember that this part is always left out of procedures. When I say result, I mean an undeclared variable needs to be used somewhere in the function. And like I said, as we go on, some of these words and things will become more clear, so don't become too overwhelmed just yet. The write ln procedure is a very useful procedure that can tell you why your script worked or why it didn't work. This is used a lot in a process called debugging, which means simply removing all the bugs from your script so everything works well. All this procedure does is write the string s to the debug box. So if you go to the search and type write ln, you can see it's already built into SRL, and here he gives an example of how it's built into SRL. Procedure write ln s string. So now here's an example script he wrote. I'm just going to be copying and pasting this, but I highly suggest that you actually type this out yourself. Besides these double slashes and everything after them, everything in this dark blue and bold are just code hints or notes. So just type out the actual script here, even though I will be copying and pasting it. And it says here, now when you hit run, the green play button at the top of Simba, located right here, do you see hello world in the debug box? This is probably one of the simplest scripts you're going to see. You can change hello world to anything that you want to see in the debug box. So let me clear the debug box by clicking this eraser tool right here and click play. And you can see compiled successfully, hello world, successfully executed. So what Cohen did was create a program and he named it Hello World. No space, no underscore, just one word, but if he wished he could have put an underscore. And he made a procedure called write in debug box, and every procedure needs a begin and end that ends with a semicolon. And after the begin, he used the built-in Simba function, write_ln, opening parenthesis, quote mark, and whatever string he wanted to be written. Write_ln means write line, closing parenthesis, and semicolon at the end of the line. And remember here, the main loop is anything in between the begin and end of the script. So in between this begin and end, we're telling Simba to run the procedure right in the debug box, right here. Now if I were to remove this line, which is basically the main loop, and left the begin and end empty, and press play, as you can see here, it did not write hello world. Although the procedure for hello world is here, because it was not included in our main loop, all Simba will do is make sure you wrote the code properly and that it compiles, but it will not execute the code unless we place it here. And now I'll run this again. And you can see right there, it does say hello world.